All right, guys and gals, welcome back to my channel. I'm Demetrius Hall, and this is Speed Addicts Garage. I want to work on the engine today. The reason being, if you haven't seen any past episodes, I basically blew my motor up. Well, I ain't really blow it up, but I heard it. There's a combination of things that happened to get us to this point. On this series here, we're going to dig in a little deep, try to get somewhat detailed. But make a long story short, we're building our LQ9 to put in my Nissan 240. It will have a turbo on it, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So let's get started. So to start things off, this is the motor. It's an LQ9. This is a 6 liter, so it's not a 5.3 like the common 5.3s and 4.8s. It is a 6.0. This one here in particular come out of a Cadillac Escalade. So the engine code is a LQ9. This is considered the high output 6.0. The reason being is it's got flat top pistons. It's got the Gen 4 rods, but as far as the knock sensors and all that stuff, it's still a Gen 3. On this particular motor, I want to do an OEM rebuild. I want to stretch the OEM build, and everybody's saying they're good for a lot of power, especially being the flat top pistons and the Gen 4 I or H-beam rods. So I'm pretty confident that the motor is going to be strong enough to do what I want to do. And in the meantime, I'm probably going to build another motor. I'll show you that later. But when I said that we're using the stock internals, this is what the stock internals look like. This is my second 6.0 that I blowed up or messed up. So as you can tell, I got a tremendous amount of rotating assembly components. But just an overview, this is what the flat top piston look like. This is the more favorable piston. And then here's the more favorable rod. These are the Gen 4 rods. If you can tell, they're significantly thicker than factory. I would like to put my 4.8 rod up beside it so you can see, but I mean, there's a bunch of pictures and videos out there. This joker's strong. Look at this rod. This rod is strong. From my knowledge, the only thing that killed these rods is peak torque. When you look at the dyno graph and you see that thing go up like this, and then the horsepower peak, right there at that spot where that torque kind of stopped, that's peak torque, and you want to kind of pull timing out to save these rods. This crank is not known to have any issues. When you talk about LS's blowing up, nobody's like, oh man, my crank broke in half, that's why I blowed up. No, it's usually the rods. It's usually a piston, like in my case, not this. So this is the 6.0 crank. We will go over what we're going to do to this, but make a long story short, we're going to put sandpaper on all these journals to get this thing right. When we get to that point, I'll show you, but let's go over to the block first. All right, so to start off with the block, the first thing we need to do is we need to get these cylinders prepped for our OEM piston rings. I've already tapped that one a few times just to make sure I get my up and down stroke, my in and out stroke, you know what I'm saying? I want to make sure I got that mud down pat, and I did. And let me show you what we're using to basically put the 45 cross hatching patterns back in this cylinder so that when we put our rings in, it'll seal good. We're using that BRM Flex Hone. So when it comes to honing the cylinder walls, you got two options. You can use that old school style where you got like the 3 little stones that look like that. I know I got 4 fingers and that joker spin around. If you don't know how to use that joker, man, you can jack up your stuff. But what they end up doing is these engineers, I think these cats are working with Elon Musk, man. They have engineered this deal here called a Flex Hone tool. You can't mess up with this thing. The only thing you can mess up with this is running your drill too fast or going in and out like too fast. So if you're familiar, if you're interested in this one, that's the part number right there. Since we got a 6.0, our bore is 4.0. You always want a Flex Hone tool that's a little bit bigger than 4.0. In this case, boom, is 4 1/8. And then also that number right there, which is actually part of the part number, that 240, that's the grit. So that's the grit, that's the abrasive on this. And by the way, I have technically not put, or I technically haven't successfully put a motor together. It has lasted. So everything you're gonna see in this video, take it with a grain of salt, okay? With a grain of salt. All right, first off too, we're using this drill. This is the old school, this is Task Force, man. I think they even made a movie. But the cool thing about this drill is you got a knob right here where you can control it. And in order to control it, I don't want this thing to go all the way hand. So if I turn this joker to the left or up, which is on the minus sign, when I pull this trigger, it's only gonna go but so fast. compared to if I turn that little knob down to the plus, man, this joke gonna be out of control. So you want a certain RPM and you want a certain, as I talked about, in and out motion. So I'm gonna give you an example. Let's make it happen. So what I like to do, spray these balls down, hit these balls with some penetrate juice, hit them cylinder walls real quick, and check your boy out. And then also you want to count your strokes. I did 40 strokes on this first one, so I want to make sure I do 40 strokes on the rest of them. Wipe that joker out so we can see that cross hatching pattern. Yeah, look at that pattern. You see that? Look at that cross hatching, boy. And then that's the first one I did. That mud look good. All right, now that we got the cylinder walls all completed, now we need to clean them. Like I said before, you can wipe these things out with something like a ATF fluid, automatic transmission. I'm sure there's a few other things you can clean it with, but I'm gonna do something that's controversial, and I'm gonna wash it with the pressure washer. After I blew everything off with compressed air, I hit the cylinder walls and all like machine surfaces with some of this WD-40. And let this be food for thought. Don't spray your engine off with well water, because this must got some minerals or something in there, and it's kind of got like a little bit of a stain. Can you see that stain? So I think I might hit them jokes with another like 10 strokes, and then we're gonna be back in business. And I wanted to address something real quick. When we get to that point, I'll show you, but you see all those little marks I got on this deal here? All of those marks are from when I was using my Dialboard indicator, and I was using that to check my bearing clearances, basically trying to check the oil film or the difference between this diameter and the diameter on the journal. And on a couple of these spots, I don't know if the pressure washer did it or what, but you can feel like a little bit of a groove. One of the cats, Frey, over there at the local Advanced Auto, this joker told me a trick one day, and I ain't believe him, so I said I'm gonna try it. He was like, take you a piece of daggone newspaper, and what you do is take that newspaper and rub that mud right there on that daggone bearing, and believe it or not, that newspaper got just enough grit on that mud that it can make that bearing back smooth. You can't tell it, but I can tell it because I can feel it and you can't feel it. But take my word for it, that joker smooth, why? That joker smooth, why? And check this junk out, that joker daggone right, man. I've been rubbing on them daggone bearings like I rub on my wife at night. And look at that mud, boy, that junk got some material on it. So daggone Frey, you was right, bro. That junk is doing nothing but smoothing it out. And with it being aluminum, it's actually like kind of like polishing it. So I have to, next time I go to the store and get some daggone oil or something, I gotta let that cat know that, yo, you was right. And speaking of the main journals, let me show you how we take measurements on this stuff. This thing right here is called a Dialboard Gauge. It's used to measure round things like that, or like that, or like your cylinder bore in order to check, you know, like your piston, the cylinder wall clearance. The cool thing about this one is this is a digital one. I like my readings to basically come right out the way it's supposed to. So I know you can't see it, but the way this deal works is you got units, which our units we're gonna be measuring in inches. You got your 0 button with zeros it out. You got this RAN button, meaning that if you wanted to, this setting right here, as you sweep it, it will document the lowest number. This thing is kind of finicky, so I stopped using that. What I end up using is I use this deal here. You got ABS and you got set. The ABS, I don't know what it stands for, but this is the part where you put the number in and then you go back to set, that's the 0 section. We're gonna use this section to basically figure out the measurement from this point here to that little point there. Once we take the measurement using this outside micrometer, we turn around, turn this thing to set, and then we can actually input that number that we got off of this, measuring this. We can actually put it in that number, meaning that when that number's in there, every time we sweep this thing, it'll go down, and then that is the number. You want this deal here to be just a smidge bigger than the diameter of what you're trying to sweep it through, and you want to use the least amount of shims. So this is how I set my deal up. Go to 0. The reason I do the 0 is so that I can know that when I push on that plunger, how much it moves. And what I want to do is I want to take the measurement from this point to this point. Is I want to turn this thing in to the point where it touches it, and it's not going to move my number right there. That's my number. I'm gonna lock it. I'm not good at teaching how to do this kind of stuff because I just understand it from watching YouTube, but basically this is a 2 to 3 inch micrometer. Yeah, I'm not even gonna try to teach y'all, man, because I don't even know, but I'm gonna write the number down what this is. So we know that the number starts off with a 2, so we're gonna do a 2 point. So that first number is gonna be a 5. Each of these little small marks, I don't even know if I can even zoom in, but each of these little small marks is 25. So we got 25, 50, and then we're not quite at the 75 because it hasn't went all the way down to the 0. So we actually take that 50 plus 20 is 70, and you got 71, 72. It's the number right before that line, so that's 73. So you write your 73, and then what you do is you line these 9 lines up at the top. Whichever line lines up, it's gonna be that number, and then that's gonna be the 10th. Because I'm not good at math, but I understand how to read it. And that is our number right there. See that? 2.5735. So now what we do, so now we can go to absolute, and then that number that we just documented, the 2.5735, that's the number that we put in there. I'm about 1/10 off. I'm not gonna sweat it, but now we can take this and sweep it into the bore of our choice. All right, so on our main, or this being an LS block, we got 5 mains, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the outside main. So I've already got my brand new OEM bearings in there. I've already torqued this thing down. I've already got my deal put into here. I already know what my measurement is of that. So I already put that in there. And so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna sweep this thing and we're gonna record the lowest number. I want to put this thing on this side or that little side. I don't want to put it in that hole. And then I wanted this side up here is basically flat. So I got it in there. I use 2 hands. I kind of put my hand on this bottom of this little ball. And when I sweep this deal here, you probably can't see it. Let me get you set up where you can see it real quick. So what you do is sweep that thing till you get the lowest number. We got 2.5615. Basically 15.5, but I'm gonna call it 2.5615. Let me back it up a smidge. 2.561. 2.5615. Write it down. All right, so I've already done my math, so just ignore that number. But before I got 2.5614. So just imagine that being the 5. Now we need to measure our crank. I've already measured it. We're gonna measure it with this right here. So let's go to the crank. Let me show you how to measure that real quick, or how I measured it. So this is my crankshaft, and also this is my little stand that I made out of 2x4. I had some random 2x4 laying around. I took it, cut it to length, made a little V in it to hold both the front and the back. I labeled it because I'm special. And now we got our crank on the stand. What we just got finished measuring was this section, this first journal on the main. When you measure this, you got to make sure that you don't have your oil holes in the way. So on this front one, we only got 1 hole. And when I take this measurement, I'm gonna take this deal here and put it on there like that. And when you use this thing, you can turn this piece, and then this piece, when you turn it in the back, it's got a ratcheting motion, which actually applies the perfect amount of tension. Then I slide it back and forth, ratchet it while I slide it back and forth, make sure I got it. That's it. Now let's go and take this to the table and read it real quick. We know that this is a 2. In between here is a 2 because it's a 2 to 3 inch micrometer. So this is a 2. 2 point, remember, 5. This next number, so you got a 5, and then you got, it's on the second mark. So you got the 25 of 50. So it's 2.50 plus, starting at 0, wrapping around. So it's gonna be 50 plus 9, because whatever the line on this side of this anvil that's below this main line, that's the number it is. So it's a 5, 50 plus 9, so it's 2.559. And then if you want the 10th, again, look at whichever line over here lines up with one of these lines. And it looks like we're right at the 4. So that's 4/10. Now, all we need to do is take this number and subtract it from that number, and that'll actually give us our oil clearance. See, man, I told y'all I suck at math. That right there is the number that we got with the main caps on and the bearing in there, 2.5614. Actually, we got 2.5615. That's that number. I wrote it there. That's the number that we just measured, which is the diameter of the crank, which is right there. We take those two numbers and subtract it, boom, that's what we get, 0.0020. So that's basically 2 thousandths. You need this number because you need to know what the tolerance is. Go over here to the whiteboard. That's the numbers that are the specifications from factory, in between 8 10,000ths and 2 thousandths and 5/10. Did I say that? Hey, look, bump that, man. I'm just gonna do it like this. The tolerance is in between 0.0008 and 0.0025. Okay, if you want performance, from my research, that's what they said. You want it to be around like 1,000, 1,500 to basically 16 to 18 is what you want. I want my stuff to be on the looser side of things. They say the looser side of things is safer, meaning that you got a little bit of more of an oil film in between the two surfaces that you don't want to touch. Basically, make a long story short, the hotter the motor get and you got a real tight tolerance, the higher chance you have of that junk touching. So like I said, you know, with turbos and stuff, you got more heat, you got a lot more force, you got a lot more power that you're gonna make. You know what I'm saying? The factory motor's only making 300 horsepower, so that's why those tolerances are already small. But if you open up those tolerances, it's supposed to be safer, but at the same time, you're supposed to possibly lose a little bit of oil pressure. That's why they make the Mellon high volume oil pumps and stuff like that, or high pressure oil pumps. But in our case, I'm trying to get my stuff as close to 2 as possible. I'm not gonna bore you with all the measurements that I've done. I've already done my stuff, but that's the numbers that I've gotten. You take your Dialboard gauge, you take those measurements, you write them down on a little chart like this, and then you take your crank measurements and you measure that, and then you basically subtract the 2, and then that's what gives you your oil clearance. We've already done a couple of these journals. I wanna say I've done this, basically I've done all of them. And when I say I've done whatever, I'm having speech problems, man. I think I got high blood pressure. I don't know if it's messing with my brain or not, man. I'm kind of hurt. I'm kind of distraught right now. I polish my crank, and what I use to polish it, I know it sounds crazy, but I hit that mug with some 220. What you do is you take you a little piece of sandpaper, you take you some Gorilla Tape, and you put your Gorilla Tape on there when it's dry, because Gorilla Tape is strong. And what you do is you cut you a little piece of sandpaper, the same thickness as the journal that you're trying to polish up. And what you do is you hit that mud with some WD-40, and then you hit this with a little WD-40. You wrap that puppy around there, and then you take you a shoelace and wrap it around. Hold on, let me show you real quick. All right, let's see if I can do this one and give you a better example. But all you're doing is this right here. You kind of pulling that joker back and forth, and then you just kind of working it all the way around there. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna polish that crank up so that joker will be about brand new. You can actually use some mother's polish on that mug after you're done with this, and then that joker will look better than factory. But from my understanding, we don't need to do all that. All we need to do is this. And I'm not gonna do no more than I got to. Now, if this was my built motor, like if I had like $2,500 in parts going in this mug, you best believe I'm gonna hit that joker with some of that mother's polish, some of that stuff that had your wheels looking fresh. But for now, I'm gonna do this because it's gonna get the job done. And then turn the crank over like that. Make sure it don't fall off your stand that you made. Then you hit the other side. I've already done this, and then I checked it with the micrometer. And guess what? Ain't nothing changed. Now, if you hit this joker with some 220, and go ham on it for a little bit, it's gonna change a little bit. I took a little bit off a couple of these journals just to try to get my stuff to like the 2000s. Do I recommend that? No. Was I scared to do it? And we're gonna find out if me taking a little material off these journals was a bad thing or a good thing when I seen this joker. Wipe that joker down with a little bit of something. And then let me hit that light on that joker so you can see what we working with. Cause I'm gonna tell you right now, that joker slick like a baby's bottom. See, look at that joker. Hold on, that ain't a good example. There you go, that's a good example. It's got some lines in it. Dang, I ain't never shine no light on it. That joint got some lines in it, man. But it don't matter. Them lines, you can't feel nothing. So I think it's all right. So I ain't gonna bore you with polishing that crank, but basically we're gonna hit the mains and then we're gonna hit where the rods go. And then we're gonna go to the next phase of slapping this mug back together.